You are Locked On Rays, your daily Tampa Bay Rays podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, my name is Kevin Weiss, and we are again without Ulises Sambrano and without Evan Klosky on a Friday episode, co-host of the Locked On Rays podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for making Locked On Rays your very first listen every day. And remember, Locked On Rays is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Rays. Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Rays. And you can email us anytime, lockedonrays@gmail.com. Well, since we last spoke, it was a happy day on a Wednesday mailbag episode as the Rays offered up a really, really impressive comeback against the Cleveland Guardians on Tuesday night, winning 6-5. But the last couple evenings weren't so special for the Rays as they were allergic to scoring runs, evidently losing 2-1 on Wednesday. And you guessed it, 2-1 on Thursday against a Guardians team that, don't look now, they are sneaky, sneaky, sneaky good. And I think they're better than myself and others around baseball are probably giving them credit for, because they may lack the name recognition and cachet of some other ball clubs out there. But I would not be surprised in the least if several weeks from now that we find out and we see that the Guardians are the American League's representative in the World Series. They've got the pitching, they've got the starting pitching, they've got the bullpen, and I think they've got just enough hitting and clutch hitting and scrappy hitting and guys who play the game the right way and play to the very last out and do what is needed to eke out a ball game. And I think the Indians they're a fun team. They're a fun team. Just like the Rays can be a fun team, the Guardians can be a fun team. And not that this is a Locked On Guardians podcast by any means, but in watching them over the last 3 games, we learned a couple things. We learned that evidently size doesn't matter when you're Steven Kwan and Jose Ramirez. And, the other thing too that I guess lacked to mention was the infield defense and just the defensive play in general from the Guardians, whether it's Miles Straw making impressive head diving plays in the outfield or the Guardians infield. Let's put this into perspective. They got Jose Siri to ground into a double play. When's the last time that's happened? How often has that happened? So this is a team, again, it doesn't necessarily tickle you with star power, but I think they've got just enough between Andres Gimenez, Ahmed Rosario, Steven Kwan, Oscar Gonzalez, of course, Jose Ramirez. And don't look now, but Shane Bieber has a sub-3 ERA. Tristan McKenzie has a sub-3 ERA. Cal Quantrill has a sub-3.5 ERA. And the Rays, as of this recording anyway, still are not yet in the playoffs, still have not clinched that spot. I think they will. I think it's very, very likely that they will. They need either one more win or one more Orioles loss, the magic number being 1, I guess. And something tells me one of those things is going to happen within the next week or so, as the Rays, of course, have 3 games against the Houston Astros and then 3 games against the Boston Red Sox, all on the road, while the Orioles finish up against the Yankees and Blue Jays. So I would imagine that it's only a matter of time before before the Rays are enjoying a little beer and champagne, maybe a cigar or 2, as they would be making, what is it now? What would be their 4th postseason, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. Yeah, that's pretty good. So it's unfortunate that the Rays lost 2 of 3 to the Guardians and squandered opportunities. I mean, they went 1 for 10 with runners in scoring position in game 2. Game 3, they had bases loaded with 1 out in the top of the 9th, and the pitcher, I believe, for the Guardians Karinchak had walked, 3 straight hitters, and the Rays still can't capitalize. And yeah, it's unfortunate that G-Man Choi struck out at a pitch that he had no business swinging at in that matchup. But at least for G-Man Choi's sake, it seems like he's getting on somewhat a little bit of a roll, somewhat getting things going with a multi-hit game in this Guardians series, getting a double and then getting a base hit off a lefty. And then he made a terrific leaping catch from first base. So maybe, somebody besides Wander Franco and Randy Arozarena have to step up and contribute. And maybe it is G-Man Choi at this juncture. We know it's not going to be Kevin Kiermaier. We know it's not going to be Brandon Lau because those guys are hurt. But yeah, of course, it's unfortunate that the Rays are now, this is 3 straight series that they lost over the last couple of weeks. They got swept by the Houston Astros. Let's remember that. They lost, well, let me take that back. The Rays split this series against the Blue Jays and then lost this series against the Guardians. So losing 2 of 3 series, it's not ideal, I guess, is the way I would put it. But there were some positives. There were some positives to glean out of this series against the Guardians, and we'll get to that. But first, we have to tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all of the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcast, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head over to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. Now, before I get into one of the bigger positives, yes, I do have a positive from this Rays Guardians series. I need to put this out of the way first. The Rays, unlike previous years, are not getting it done in close games. The Rays are now 7-17 in one-run games on the road compared to 20-8 at home. More broadly, the Rays fell to an R 27-24 in one-run games and 11-10 in extra innings. And as it stands today, if the Blue Jays keep doing work and the Mariners keep doing work, Tampa Bay very well could find themselves right where they were this week in facing the Guardians on the road. And I don't think that's something that you necessarily want to look forward to if you're a Rays fan, considering the Guardians, as I mentioned, better than what I think the baseball world thinks they are, but they're 42-33 at home, while the Rays are 34-41 on the road. So just put that into perspective. And what's so funny is that I look at the standings, I look at the division leaders, I look at the wild card, I look across baseball, and it just gets me thinking. It kind of gets me giddy in a way, because there very well could be a possibility that next year we talk about the Orioles on the come up. The Red Sox, quite frankly, I don't know what they're doing. I don't necessarily know what their plan is, short-term, mid-term, long-term, but they are somewhat around a 500 ball club. I think they have 75 wins as of now, but you consider the Yankees, you consider the Blue Jays, you consider the Rays, you consider the Orioles, you consider the Red Sox. Did I leave anybody out? I don't think so in the AL East. This might have to be a prop bet of where next year, 2023, all 5 AL East teams have a winning record, or at the very least get 80 wins apiece, at least 80 wins apiece. I think they all could eke out another 81 or get to 81, 82, because when you consider they're already this close as it is, you're already this close to having so many 500 or better ball clubs or winning ball clubs. And then you bring in the certainty of there being balanced schedules, more balanced schedules next year, where these teams are beating up less on each other and beating up theoretically more on other ball clubs out there. There is a window, there is an opportunity, there is a chance and a likelihood that that could happen. And that would really, really be fun and really, really be competitive baseball. But of course, kind of putting a bow on this thing, we have to mention Tyler Glasnow making his return to the big leagues, first time in 14, 15 months. Can you believe it? It's been 14, 15 months since he last registered an outing, a strikeout, a pitch, a ball, whatever, just being on an MLB mound. And it almost seems like forever ago that there was that whole controversy over sunscreen and limiting the use of sunscreen and other vehicles, if you will, to make sure that you can get a good grip on the ball. And Glasnow had that very lashing out press conference that got him play in the national media and local media, of course, but just a great story that Glasnow not only returning following Tommy John surgery, but also being really, really good in his outing. I mean, right from the get-go, throwing 98, 99 miles per hour. We see the hammer curveball. He actually mixed out his pitches pretty well between the four-seamer, the slider, and the curveball. Really, to me, it looked like, yes, it was a shorter Glasnow outing than we would be used to seeing of yesteryear, but his stuff, his delivery, his demeanor, that didn't change to me. I mean, he looked like the same old dominant, amazing Tyler Glasnow. And that's something that the Rays really, really need going into the postseason with some of the other pitching injuries that they've dealt with and some of the struggles of some others of late, i.e. Corey Kluber, i.e. Shane McClanahan. So to have Glasnow in the fold is a big, big add, of course. And what's really exciting, if you're a Rays fan, is not just what Glasnow can do the rest of this regular season and into the postseason, but the fact that he's going to be around for the next several years. Let's remember, last month, or it was over a month ago, I can't remember the exact timeline there, but he signed a 2-year, $30.35 million contract extension. So he's around this year making $5.1 million. He'll get $5.35 million next season. And then in 2024, which is the first year that he would have been eligible for free agency, he'll get $25 million. And who knows, maybe he just loves the Rays, loves what the Rays are doing, and might sign another shorter contract extension with the team. And I don't know if this has really gotten enough play. The fact that the Rays are stepping up and paying them. They're stepping up and paying people. They step up and pay Manny Margot. They step up and pay Wander Franco. They step up and pay Corey Kluber. So this should really actually get you excited for the future. If you're a Rays fan of, maybe they will go out and throw some money at a bat in free agency, or 2 bats in free agency, or a bat and an arm in free agency. That contract extension, as short as it is, but still throwing $25 million per year at a guy is not very Rays-like, shows me that they're for real and they're in play and they're serious about getting things done, if you will. Now, are they going to go all overboard and outspend so many other teams? Probably not, but at least they're spending to a threshold that we think they should spend. So Glasnow, again, the stuff was really good. He worked 3 innings, allowed 2 hits and a walk while striking out 3. I can't remember his exact pitch count. I mean, around 50 pitchers or so. I'll be curious to see if the Rays extend him by a half dozen pitches in his last outing, and then you go into the playoffs and maybe you can extend him a little bit more, or you just keep him on that 50 pitch benchmark and deploy him however you see fit. So really excited to see what he can do going forward, not just this year, but next year as well. One other thing that I want to mention before we end the pod on a Friday here, and this was an interesting article that I saw online. And if you're somebody like me that is consistently and constantly squawking about the length of games and how games are just baseball games, that is, just drone on and drag on. And you've already got spring training, you've got the 162 regular season games, then you've got the playoffs, and they're all pretty much well over 3 hours. This news should be good if you're somebody that wants to see the game grow and wants to see people generate more interest in the sport. So there was a report from the Associated Press that the pitch clock in the minor leagues cut those games this year by 25 minutes to an average of 2 hours and 38 minutes per game. Now we're talking. Contrast that with big league 9-inning games averaging 3 hours and 4 minutes this season. Just take that into perspective. 3 hours and 4 minutes per game, per 162, not including spring training, not including playoffs. I mean, the investment that you have to make in watching a baseball game compared to a football game, a hockey game, a basketball game, a soccer game is just extraordinary. So a little bit of more background on this. So clocks at AAA were set at 14 seconds with no runners on base and 19 seconds with runners on. At lower levels, the clocks were at 18 seconds with runners. Of course, we know that MLB announced earlier in September that clocks will be introduced in the major leagues next year at 15 seconds with no runners and 20 seconds with runners, a decision that was actually opposed by the Players Association. And going forward with this, pitchers will be penalized a ball for violating the clock. In the minors, violations decreased from an average of 1.73 per game in the second week to 0.41 in week 24. So pitchers struggled with it at first and then finally adjusted and got their body aligned to speed themselves up for play. Also, pitchers are penalized a ball for violating the clock. I just read that actually. But moving forward with this rule, there will be a limit of 2 pickoff attempts or step-offs per plate appearance, a rule that was also part of the minor league experiment this season. A third pickoff throw that is not successful would result in a balk. And what happened from all of this was that stolen bases increased to an average of 2.81 per game from 2.23 in the minors this year, with the success rate rising to 78% from 68%. So me likey this rule. Me likey this pitch clock rule. In addition, the bases being larger. So this tells me that we're going to see shorter games, but more action. Games cut down by around 25 minutes and more activity on the base paths, which could lead to more runs. So the baseball may actually be able to have their cake and eat it too, in the sense of, hey, we don't want games to be as long, but we want there to be activity. We don't want there to be lulls in play. And this is a not an indictment. That's probably not the right word, but pitchers, you're on notice. If you have destinations of being in the bigs and staying in the bigs, you can't be affording yourself or penalizing yourself a ball because you're too slow. You better speed things up. So you better be utilizing this entire offseason to work on your delivery and work on getting your body and your mind prepared to make that next pitch. And that's honestly something that is going to have to be accounted for and looked at and considered in scouting reports. And when players are drafted and traded for, of, hey, you may have great stuff, you may be an electric talent, but if you're Joel Peralta on the mound, if you're Ryan Yarbrough on the mound, if you're Jonathan Papelbon on the mound, that's not going to cut it. You need to be able to get going. And if you're not able to get yourself in the right mindset in between every, whatever, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever it is, then you're not going to last for long. So it really puts another challenge on pitchers out there that they have to be mindful of that. And in some ways, it really could help some guys because they're not overthinking. I feel like sometimes these pitchers, they get into paralysis by overanalysis. Like you're thinking too much. Just get the ball and throw it. And be an athlete up there. And sometimes that can solve all your issues. But I am excited for these rules changes because, man, speeding up the game is something I've harped on for such a long time. And I make the old joke, but it's really not even a joke. Like, I'm kind of quasi serious about it, is that ball game should be 7 innings. And could you imagine if you added up the 7 innings with these pitch clock metrics? I mean, we could be out of there in under 2 hours. That would be awesome. I love a quick ball game. So that is something to focus on and look forward to next year and beyond. Now, I say all that. I mentioned it about pitchers. You got to be ready. You got to be quick. You got to be on the ball. But I also wonder if maybe there could be an unintended consequence of maybe a guy's arm needs that extra 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds, as opposed to just spinning. So that could also be something where we may see even more pitching injuries because guys aren't really quite ready or recovered to throw, or they're in a rush and they slip off the mound or slip off the rubber. Like, a million things can happen. So I think there's going to be some unintended consequences, I guess, maybe possibly both good and bad, but I wouldn't be surprised if you maybe see some more injuries out of this, in addition to games being shorter. One last thing I want to mention, of course, the Rays do have this 3-game series against the Astros. Drew Rasmussen going up against Framber Valdez, Shane McClanahan versus Christian Javier, and Corey Kluber versus Luis Garcia. But if you're a baseball fan, I recently got a book, and it's actually a memoir, I should say. It's called Clubby, and it is from, I believe the guy's name is Daniel Larson. I hope I'm correct on that. But he spent 2 seasons as the clubhouse manager of the Aberdeen Ironbirds, which is an affiliate of the Baltimore Orioles. And you talk about an in-depth, insightful, seeing how the sausage is made of working in baseball, working in professional sports. It is an amazing, amazing read. Like, I'm getting annoyed by the fact that I have to record this podcast and I can't be reading that book right now. So I highly, highly recommend that. And you learn just how interesting and quirky some of these ball players are, and how there's guys that you encounter that you like. There's guys that you encounter that you don't like. You encounter some really, really interesting things. I'm not going to give it away, of course, but I would just highly recommend it if you get a chance. It's called Clubby. I would not be surprised in the least if it's eventually made into some sort of documentary or television show or movie at some point, because it is just so vivid. And the person who wrote it, man, he was good. He was good. So I highly recommend it. I spent like $10 for it to read the Kindle version. So that's something that if you do have some downtime and are looking for a solid read, I highly recommend that. All right. Thank you for making the Locked On Rays podcast your very first listen every day. Now make your second listen the Locked On MLB podcast. That is also free and available on all platforms. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Stay safe, and we will talk to you next week.